A philosophical discipline that's focused on the study of interpretation is called hermeneutics. It got its name from Hermes, a god from Greek mythology who was the messenger of the gods. A discipline that's dealing with the way we know and understand reality around us is called epistemology. It's defined as the theory of knowledge, and it explores how the mind relates to reality. It's considering the different psychological routes to knowledge. Instead of getting into very complicated philosophical exploration of these two areas, we'll see how they work through descriptive examples. The first example would be a great movie from 1957 called 12 Angry Men, which portrays, among other things, how people interpret something. The movie is showing a trial and how jurors saw all its evidences and witness testimonials. The whole movie consists of the conversations between 12 jurors, from which just one of them is having doubts on what he has seen and heard in the trial, and wants to explore the possibility of the innocence of the accused. The rest of jurors were all set up to convict the accused. Then the story goes on to reveal how each of those 11 jurors were actually highly influenced by their own experiences, beliefs, unresolved traumas, prejudices, or just indifferences to convict the accused without really going too deep into all the facts presented in the trial. For example, one juror wanted to convict the accused, who was a young man, because he was personally hurt and disappointed by his son. The other juror wanted to convict him because the majority wanted to do so, and it would shorten the trial and he could get to a baseball game. There was one juror who was pretty rational, but he was taking the testimonies of witnesses as a hard truth, as if the witnesses themselves were completely uninfluenced by any factors, which they weren't, as he later realized. So although the jurors were supposed to have 12 impartial, uninfluenced, objective views of the case, it turns out that most of them didn't. Though they really didn't know anyone involved in the case personally, their own personal experiences were very much determining the way they viewed and understood what happened in that event. But we should emphasize that they all had very different, totally unrelated things that influenced their decision. Now let's look at an example of an event that has many eyewitnesses, let's say a car crash. Even in such case, we would surely get many different stories from different people witnessing the same event. The same car crash would be interpreted very differently by a driver compared to a non-driver, because they have different perspectives. A driver knows things about driving and traffic that a non-driver doesn't. Even such a thing like a physical distance between an eyewitness and a car crash would result in different type of experience. It would be much more emotional and terrifying for someone standing 30 feet away than someone that is 300 feet away. That emotional impact would surely influence the testimony, and how much facts can that witness provide about the crash and what kind of testimonial it would be. A person close to a crash would be considered less trustworthy because of traumatic experience caused by the proximity of the crash. So we can see how there are many different things that are involved in our understanding and interpretation of the world around us. Let's take a drastic example to show the importance of interpreting reality. Let's say a man falls from the 3rd floor and remains motionless in his legs. Is that event bad or good? Is it a tragedy or a blessing? The answer depends solely on the interpretation of the one to whom it happened. Although that event can be interpreted by other people, it did not happen to them, so their interpretation is not important. The person that this did happen to can fall into depression, can give up on himself, but he can understand it as something that opened up new horizons for him, to live his life better in some other sense that he hadn't even thought about before. Everything in between is also possible. But certainly the event itself depends on the one who interprets it and on his worldview. We won't go too far with the examples, which can go into hundreds or even thousands of different influences that affect our understanding and interpretation of something we see or experience. But it's obvious that there are a lot of things involved into the way we form an opinion or a conclusion about something or someone. Let's just explore some major influences that every human being is exposed to. Culture, religion, ethics, politics are some of the things which influence our attitude of what's right or wrong, and it's very important when we interpret something. These type of influences create core beliefs of a person's view of the world, foundational beliefs, and they will highly affect our understanding of things and people and how we value them. Social, marital, and financial status also affect our interpretation. For example, is someone dressed in worn clothes because of his financial capabilities or because it's a social rebellion, a kind of a fashion statement? Geographical position and climate will also influence our lives. The way we dress and what we do during the day won't be the same in the desert, in the Arctic, or on a tropical island. That influences our behavior and customs, which then influence our values and how we see other people. For example, a man resting in the middle of the day in the desert is not doing that because he is lazy, but because he can get a heat stroke. But that kind of behavior would be seen differently in the Arctic climate. In all these examples, we see that we as human beings are always influenced by something, while interpreting and understanding the reality around us. On the other hand, science has always strived toward objective reality, which is more an idealistic aspiration than something that emerges from experience. Because the main question always is, whose experience, whose understanding, and whose interpretation? And as we showed, whoever is trying to define reality has his own way of interpreting it and is influenced by his own views of the world that derive from all the influences we talked about: culture, religion, politics, social status, climate, and many, many more. Apart from these things that are a matter of our interpretation, and we see that there are many of them, there are also some phenomena that we call facts that can be tested and repeated through experiment. Like, for example, in mathematics and chemistry, we always get the same result out of the same numbers, or same reaction out of the same ingredients. For more details on this subject, make sure to check out our video about scientific method and induction. The link is in the description. But what we showed there is that even the facts like 2 plus 2 equals 4 are not a product of some idealistic objective reality, but that it simply emerges from real-life experience. Now you'll say that kind of experience is the same for everyone, therefore it is an objective truth. But we didn't account for a number of people who are not participating in the reality in which most of us do. Here we're talking about mentally challenged people who might not recognize that 2 plus 2 equals 4. They might not see it as an objective truth out of many reasons. They may be mentally challenged because of traumatic experience, developmental issues, chemical imbalances, or they can just be overly eccentric and refusing to acknowledge the obvious. Whatever it might be, these people exist, and their state of mind is very human indeed. Just as only human mind can have awareness and understanding of the reality around us, only a human mind can completely or partially reject that reality. So we see that it takes more than the facts that are outside of our mind for it to be an objective reality for us. It takes a will to acknowledge it and participate in it. As we mentioned, science is always trying to get to so-called objective reality, but the problem is that that ideal was never proven to actually be possible. If we look at the history of philosophy, from ancient Greece to more recent times, including modern times, no one ever proved that objective reality is actually possible to achieve. There are only attempts to remove one influence we endure, only to replace it with another. And each subsequent attempt reveals another challenge to be objective, which asks for the next solution, and so on. Even if we just look at the meaning of the word objectivity, we can see that in order to be objective, one would have to be, I guess, an object. But obviously the problem here is that objects don't have consciousness. An object can't grasp reality around it. Plants or animals also are not capable of it. Of course, animals have more sophisticated experience of reality around them than plants, but it's still not the type of awareness that can reflect on that perceived reality. So that only leaves humans. But as we saw, humans are very much influenced with many things while they are trying to perceive reality around them. That's why humans can only be subjective, since they are the ones performing the perception of reality around them. Humans can try to be objective by not letting all the different influences affect their perception of reality. But there will always be something that does influence it. All we can really do is be aware that it is so, and decide which of those influences we should discard and which ones we don't want to let go, because they represent our values, our core beliefs, our view of the world which we live by. Either way, the notion that we can be completely unbiased, not influenced in any way, is clearly a false pretense, a delusion. So considering everything we said, we should be very careful when anyone or anything wants to represent its views to us as the objective, impartial reality. Even more if it's coming in the name of science or philosophy, because we see that the never-ending aspiration of science and philosophy to achieve objectivity is still there exactly because it hasn't been achieved. Although there's a strong urge in modern world to reach the ideal of being objective, and so much that everyone is trying to present themselves as objective, us humans have a lot of things going on while interpreting and understanding the reality around us. And so we should always remember that all the people we meet and talk with also have many influences that have resulted in them thinking and saying what they think and say.